In one of the many millions of TV spots for Godzilla vs. Kong, we see our boy Kong sitting on what looks like a throne. He has his new weapon handy, and he's sitting on that bitch like he's Mufasa at Pride Rock.
Help me!
So my question is, what does it mean? Why is Kong sitting on a throne? I mean, we call him King Kong, but you never expect him to have a full-on throne. Just like actual lions in the Serengeti are not sitting up on thrones themselves. So here's what I think. This is my best educated guess, and you guys can fill in the blanks if you have more concrete evidence, but I guess we'll all figure it out when the movie is actually released. In the story, the graphic novel rather, called Skull Island: The Birth of Kong, which was a sequel and a prequel to Kong Skull Island, it says that this is a series that told the story of a secret team of Monarch operatives returning to Skull Island to discover the truth behind Kong and the island he was born to protect. In so doing, they unlock an ancient history of monster conflict, witness a primal war between Kong and an otherworldly ecosystem of deadly new creatures, and finally reveal how this lonely god became the last of his kind. Some guy in the story has a series of visions, and in one of those visions, he sees when Kong was born. You see, the graveyard that we see with Kong's parents, or those skeletons of those larger Kong species, used to be the den of the Kong super species. All of Kong's ancestors and kin were fighting against the skull crawlers that came up from the hellish underground. Everything was looking hopeless even after Kong was conceived. His parents fought alongside all of the other kin to try and keep the skull crawlers at bay, right up until the moment Kong's mother gave birth to him in the middle of the freaking battlefield. So the first thing that Kong got exposed to was rage and thunder and fire and a bloodbath and death and all of his family dying all over him and these monsters attacking his family. The only interaction he's had of his mom is when she held him in his arms as she was fighting off those skull crawlers. He didn't even really get to see his dad who was busy fending off the skull crawlers to give the mother a chance to seal Kong away in the cave so that the skull crawlers would not get to him. Kong watched from behind these rocks as the skull crawlers killed his parents. Man, Bruce Wayne much? When everything finally died down, Kong left the cave gingerly and he went to his parents' bodies and he cried over them. He was lonely. He was the last of his kind because all over were the dead bodies of his species. For what I can gather, it's almost as though Kong's species were basically the lions of Skull Island. Skull Island is Pride Rock, and the skull crawlers are the hyenas. It seems as though Kong's parents, his family, altogether were basically the kings and queens of Skull Island. They were the creatures that seemed to have the better intellect of all the other creatures. They were the ones that rule and protected the island. And after the skull crawlers came up, I did a little POV of that. That is not an official thing I did it on. I did do it in line with things that happened in the movie with a backstory for the skull crawler. I'm just assuming the reason behind why they were fighting, but it could be that the skull crawlers were forced to leave the Hollow Earth because either they ate up everything down there or there was another species of creatures down in the subterranean that was proving to be more of a problem for them. So the skull crawlers decided, you know what, we'll just take our chances with those things up there that are easier to kill. And Kong's family and the skull crawlers were competing species. But the skull crawlers were way more voracious and malignant than Kong's family, and over time, even though Kong's family fought very valiantly, they would die off. The monarchs and patriarchs of Skull Island would be no more, save the last ruler, the rightful heir of his species, Kong, aka Simba. Now here's what's interesting. I gave that metaphor with the Lion King and Skull Island, but it looks, based on the trailer that we see, that Kong is sitting on a throne in the Hollow Earth. It's not on Skull Island per se, it's in the Hollow Earth, probably away from Skull Island. So what's it doing there? Is it possible that Kong and his family initially lived in the Hollow Earth? I mean, it's possible that some others could still live there. Do you think in the entire wide world that all of the great ape species that Kong belongs to were only designated in that one little area? I find that very hard to believe. He could be seen as the last of his kind as far as we're concerned because that's all he's ever known. The Eevee people and the monarch personnel who went to Skull Island, those are the only ones of those species they've ever seen. But they did say in King of the Monsters, and they did say in other works, that there are so many other kaiju that they probably haven't even discovered yet because the Hollow Earth is so vast and undiscovered. So there's that. It also means that with the ancestry of Kong, it could go back so far that his family initially lived in the Hollow Earth and they decide to go up to Skull Island, maybe for the same reason the skull crawlers did later on. Maybe it was getting too volatile down there. They're like, you know know what? We'll leave some of those people down there and we're gonna go up here where there's less competition, and they made a name for themselves, and behold, they became the kings and queens of a new area. But they probably ruled a section down there in the Hollow Earth. Now, the other theory that I have is a lot of the stuff down in the Hollow Earth based on the trailer that we've seen for Godzilla vs. Kong looks like it was made by people. I did make a remark in one of the videos that it looked man-made, and we do know that a lot of the people in the MonsterVerse did worship kaiju. I mean, many of the kaiju are based on mythological creatures, so it could be that they built this throne for Kong, or they built this throne to worship one of Kong's species. That's why it's there. That's why there's that big weapon. These people understood that lived in the Hollow Earth. Can't rule out that humans probably live in the Hollow Earth too, or some other kind of humanesque thing, and they probably required Kong's species, or a member of his species, to protect them from the skull crawlers or whatever else was happening in the Hollow Earth that was scary. So they made this throne for him as their king and their ruler. This is probably where they worshipped him. This is probably some kind of temple that Kong is in and where he got his weapon from. Being that the weapon is part of a dorsal plate, it could be that these people also saw that this ancestor of Kong fought one of Godzilla's ancestors before, and that's how it got the dorsal plate. Being that it has a throne, Godzilla can't sit on a throne, so that weird carving that's etched in the ground of Godzilla, it could be some symbolism of Kong or his species having defeated Godzilla, making him the king of the monsters. And when I say Godzilla, I mean Godzilla's species, because Godzilla also had ancestors as well. That's what I think. I think the whole thing is just built by humans to worship a member of Kong's species. Kong sits in there, he's like, okay, well, this used to belong to my ancestor, and now I'm taking the role of what this represents, which is protecting the people against monsters. And ironically, the same monster that Kong is trying to protect them from is probably the same one his ancestor was trying to protect the people from, which is a member of Godzilla's species, aka Godzilla himself. People back then would technically, before the whole, like, your blood, keep it in the family kind of thing started happening, people would choose the strongest leaders among them, people who could do the job and protect them. I miss those times. I wasn't in those times, I agree. But it is very nice to know that there was a time when people didn't just choose or elect leaders based on how swelling their words were, how good they made them feel. They chose leaders based on whether or not they were able to lead and actually protect the people and make the world better, not just like you or make you feel better in your feelings but not actually make a change. But anyway, that's how I think Kong gets his king title. He sits on the throne. He's like, yes, I am the new king. I am the one who is now going to protect the people because I'm the only one that's left. So he may not be a god, but he surely is the king. Now, if he gets trashed by Godzilla or Mechagodzilla or whomever, and he loses this fight horribly, does he still have the king title? I guess. I mean, you can slay a king and the king can still be the king unless another king takes his place. And Godzilla is the king of the monsters. What is Kong going to be the king of? That's up for debate. Anyways, that's just my 2 cents on it. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. This has been Ultiori. You ask, we answer.